Today, I'm going to give my race recap for my 2021 Chicago Marathon. 26.2 miles, 3 hours, 14 minutes, and 44 seconds. An average pace of 7 minutes and 25 seconds per mile for my 2021 Chicago Marathon. It wasn't exactly the time that I was hoping for today, but within the range of kind of like my C goal for the day. But I think that what happened is we all underestimated what the conditions were gonna be like out there today. And we also underestimated just how excited we were going to be out there racing a race of this magnitude again. And today I'm going to talk about all of that, but I do want to make sure that I kind of break it up into different sections just so that, number one, I don't forget anything, and number two, so I don't ramble too much. So you can always kind of skip ahead to whatever kind of chapter you want to check out as I go through the different sections. The first thing that I think I can talk about is the weather for the day. I think that was like kind of the big story. Going into it, I knew it was going to be hot. Temperatures were going to be on one of the warmer Chicago marathons and kind of like in recent memory. A lot of people were kind of comparing it back to 2007, which was a little bit hotter, a lot sunnier than it was on this day. And on that day, they also ran out of water at some of the later aid stations. But that year they also kind of canceled the race halfway through. So there were like announcements blaring over like speaker systems saying that like, you know, if you're not done racing, like step off the course because you're done. No, I don't think a lot of people did, but like that's kind of the thing that they were doing with the race because it was pretty intense back in 2007. I didn't run it that year, but I was watching a friend running it that year and I was just like, this is absolutely brutal. And I had very similar feelings to that kind of in terms of like what I saw out there on the day. And, you know, I don't want to say like the common like Midwest dad refrain, but it wasn't the heat, it was the humidity because the temperatures were, I mean, they started, I think, pretty much in the low 70s, like right around 70 degrees Fahrenheit for wave one. And temperatures slowly started to creep throughout the day. But the humidity was always a lot higher than I was expecting for the week. It had rained earlier in the week, and I was hoping that would draw a lot of the moisture out of the air. But instead, all I think it did was dump more moisture on the ground so that it could evaporate and create just like a blanket of humidity because it was just uncomfortable to run. I talked to a lot of people after the race that had hard time managing their heart rate. A friend of mine ended up walking off the course because at like mile 8 or mile 11, he was saying his heart rate just spiked and he couldn't get it under control and it just didn't feel right. And so I feel like that's probably the right move because later on in the race, I don't think I've ever seen a race, I think ever, where that I've participated in, where like so many people were just like being attended to by teams of EMTs, and there was lots of medical staff available. So like it was under control, it seemed. But some of those people were just like on the side of the course, like passed out, like laid out. I didn't see them moving. And it was just a little bit concerning to see that because I saw at least like 4 or 5 like kind of like little huddles of people throughout some of the later miles where people were just not doing well. And then in all the normal spots where people are kind of like off the side of the course, like stretching their calves against trees or against like walls or curbs, you know, saw definitely a lot of that too this year. So the weather took it out of a lot of people from the non-elites all the way up to the pros. Sarah Hall backed off her American record attempt. Like a couple of days before the marathon itself. Her and her team, they recognize that it's going to be not record-setting kind of day. And then some of the other pros out there kind of mentioned that the heat just got to them. And so any of you that are out there and you didn't hit your goal times for this weekend, it's disappointing. I'm a little bit disappointed in my time too. I'll be fully prepared to admit that. But in the big scheme of things, this wasn't a day about times, and it sucks for non-elites because the times are all we have, right? For pros, you'd be like, yeah, but Sarah Hall, I didn't get the American record, but I placed third in the Chicago Marathon, right? Pros get that. For us non-elites, all we kind of have is time sometimes, but this is one of those days where the times don't matter. And I was trying to kind of get people in that mindset like all the week leading up to it because I knew it was going to be warm, but I didn't really think that it would affect all of us quite as much as it did. Because we had the weird combination of not only was it really humid and uncomfortable, but then at certain parts of the race, and for me, I started really noticing it as we started heading into Lincoln Park, that the winds were really picking up. And the areas where it picked up were the areas where, like, when it's a windy day in Chicago, it's really windy. So, like, as I would have expected, like getting near Lincoln Park and going through most of the north side, some of the winds were really, really stiff winds. And I found myself like constantly trying to like duck under people to try and get like some sort of blockage from the wind. And then as soon as you did that, the wind would kind of like shift directions a little bit. So no matter what you did, you were getting some wind. And the sun did come out for certain pockets. Fortunately, the sun didn't really beat down on us too hard on this day. I think if it had, then it would have been just, really brutal out there, even more brutal than it was. And I think that also played a factor in just the way that people were not doing so great towards the end of the run. So the weather was, I think, a really big story. And it's also going to be one of those things. Everyone that like looks back on Chicago, remembers Chicago, like Chicago weather isn't always great. And on the years when it's not great, in subsequent years, people forget that it wasn't great. And they're like, oh yeah, 2019 was a great year. No, 2019 was cold and super windy. Really, really windy. Yes, a world record was set on that day, but she had like really tall pacers ahead of her to block the wind like the entire time. And the winds didn't pick up until like normal human beings started running as well. So like it was just a very different experience from what the elites get and what like the non-elites get. And this is another year where the weather was a big factor, a big feature of the race, if you want to call it a feature. So that was just something that I had a hard time dealing with too. I dumped water on myself pretty much every aid station, sometimes on my head, but usually I just dump it down kind of like my neck or down the back of my shirt, just to get it kind of like in the chest area, just to help with some of the evaporative cooling. By the end of the race, my socks were soaked because like all the water that had kept kind of dripping down, both sweat and water, just kind of pools in the socks. And that's just kind of what happens and what you'd expect from a hot day out on the course. Speaking of what I was wearing on the day, I think that everything that I picked, I really liked. So I wouldn't change a thing for kind of a day that was a little bit on the hot side and humid side. And also in terms of like being able to do what I need clothes to do for me for a 26.2 race. The shoes were fantastic. I thought that they were a great choice. I think the Meta Speed Sky is a really great marathon shoe. I think it's also a really great half marathon shoe too. And of the two, I might lean more towards half marathons, but like I really enjoyed it for the marathon. I'm not going to say I saw a ton of other Metaspeed Skies out there, but I saw a decent number of Metaspeed Skies out there. And from the women's podium, at least, numbers 2 and 3, Emma Bates and Sarah Hall were also wearing Metaspeed Sky, 2 different colors. But like they were both wearing the same Generation 1 Metaspeed Sky, and it treated them very, very well. Emma Bates looked like she was jogging. She didn't get much coverage on NBC, but what they did show over at the end of the race, it just looked like she was like just going for like a shakeout run at the end. She was just cruising. The shoe, clearly from pro to non-elite alike, it was, I think, a good choice for the race. I'm very happy with it. I wasn't second guessing it for a moment. The shorts that I wore were the Rabbit trail shorts that have just the pockets everywhere, and that worked out really well. So there's like 2 front pockets, 2 side kind of like back pockets, kind of like below the kidneys, I guess. And then a big back pocket that has a zipper on it. And I put like gel, and then 2 gels in the back pocket. So I had 6 gels total. It was really easy to reach all of them and then put my trash back into those pockets too. So had no issues with that. It held everything well. I didn't feel like anything was going to jump out or that I was going to lose any gel. So I felt like the shorts worked out great, and it was a hot day. So having that kind of like basically shorts that are like a flip belt with split shorts like attached to them, like I felt like that was like a pretty good combo of things for me to use. The singlet, the Breathe or I don't know if it's Breathe or Breath singlet from Asics. I still love that singlet. It's great. I do wish like the bibs were a little bit smaller, so like all the ventilation that's designed into that singlet could do their job a little bit better. But overall, like, you know, I didn't think about the singlet a single time. Let's talk about the pacing, and I think that's for me going to be like the bulk of the race recap in terms of kind of how did I get from lining up with the 310 group, thinking I was going to maybe get down to 307, to actually getting towards like my C goal, which was like 315, right? So I think that the big part of it, there's kind of a couple of things that I'm realizing here today, things that I've kind of always known, but they're really like coming to a head now. Is, you know, I still always get a little bit too excited at the beginning of a race. And this time I intentionally like realized that I felt like the pace group was going out a little fast, getting a little excited. Maybe they're trying to find room or something. And so I hung back and let them kind of like build some distance. And I felt good about that. But even doing that, I felt looking at my watch at the paces that the paces were a little bit fast. Now, before we get more into the pacing though, I did have a really weird issue with my watch. So I kind of had the activity ready. You know, I saw all the color changes indicating that like my heart rate monitor was talking to the watch, and my foot pod was talking to the watch. All that seemed to be lining up well. But then as I crossed the line to start, I hit the button to start the activity. And then I'm running, like finding space, just trying to figure out where I am in the giant, like kind of like wave of people. And I look down at the watch and it's telling me 0 heart rate or no heart rate reading, 0 distance elapsed, and 0 pace. So like no pace reading whatsoever either. So I was like, this is weird. So either at this point, I'm just going to manually lap at each mile marker, or I'm going to have to end the activity. So I end the activity real fast and I start a new activity. But by this time I've already gone, I've been running for like a little over a minute. And I start the new activity like while I'm under a bridge, and it looks like I'm getting pace and distance data from the foot pod at that point. And it looks like I'm getting the right heart rate data at that point as well. And looking at the numbers now, I do think that all those things were working fine, but I did have that initial hiccup, which was really weird. I've never had that happen before, but that kind of threw off like kind of like the rest of my like, where am I at the halfway point? Where am I at like 20 miles? Like in terms of like my total elapsed time, that part was a little hard for me to kind of figure out, but that didn't really affect anything else because everything else I was looking at kind of more instantaneously and kind of looking at both the numbers that came from Polar, which then push over to Stride, and I'll show some of the Stride statistics that shows, like the graphs I think are a little bit easier to kind of read a bunch of mile splits all at once. My mile splits are showing that I'm running way fast, super hot. And like mile 3 was super crazy fast, more like half marathon PR pace for me. And I had another mile later in the race that was also kind of at that level of speed. But like in the beginning, I don't think that I hit, according to my Stride foot pod, I don't think that I hit a pace that was under my goal, like within my goal pace of 7:14 per mile. I don't think I hit that for like the first 16 miles. And so I felt like I was going a little bit fast. But when I looked at the 5K splits and when I was like manually lap timing, I felt like in the first couple of miles we were going fast. But, once we kind of left downtown, I do feel like we were hitting the splits pretty much right on. That still just felt fast though. And I'm thinking that a part of it is I just don't know how to run in a straight line. So I think that looking at just overall my entire my run activity, I got 26.89 miles on the day, and that's not including like the first maybe like 300 meters of the race. That's in that I didn't get counted because my watch was doing that weird thing. So like I ran like almost a mile extra over the course of 26.2 miles, which seems like a lot, which makes me think maybe my foot pod maybe needs some recalibration, or there could be something else going on. Or the other thing that could be happening, which I think is probably about as likely, is that the Chicago Marathon course in certain points is very, very wide. And so like it's very easy, depending on how you're running or how like the crowd of people is kind of taking you along with it, that you could be running extra distance. So think about the fact that just running from like lane 1 to lane 2 can, over the course of 1 mile, add a substantial amount of distance. Imagine that, but going from like, not that I'm like weaving like this back and forth along the road, but if I'm not taking the exact blue line, and frankly, in the Chicago Marathon, you don't even get to see the blue line for maybe the first 3-4 miles, just because there's so many people around you. I think that could be playing a part of it as well. So, I'm not really sure exactly why, but I think that one of the things that I need to start thinking about a little bit more is not being like super like, like I got to defend my tangents and like start getting aggressive about it. But I think that I need to think a little bit more about like the route that I'm taking. I know that part of it is that, I've got this, I run with a camera. And so like when I want to get footage, I tend to kind of like meander away from the pack a little bit so that I'm not, in people's way when I'm doing those things. So I think for me going to be something that just kind of comes with the territory for some of these races that are of a magnitude like Chicago, where there's just this many people involved in the race and where it's this packed for basically like the entire race. So just some interesting things to note with the pacing there. I think that, while we were fast, it felt like we were running hard, but I also felt like I was being relatively controlled, and I felt great going through the halfway point. Then when we started heading west, the winds really picked up again because some of the buildings get shorter and just the winds were really picking up. And it was a bit of an effort to kind of like, I'd cobbled together a group. I was like, just, like, what's your name? What's your name? And just like trying to meet and make as many friends of the people that I noticed were running where I was running for the last couple of miles. And I tried to kind of like, run with them for a long time. And then after we went west and did the turnaround to head back towards the city, a little bit after that, I started getting a little bit excited. And I put in a really fast mile at mile 16 for no real reason other than the fact that I think I saw people I knew. And so then I just got super excited and started running faster. And I think we hit like an aid station, and I skipped an aid station and the pack didn't skip that aid station. And then the next thing I knew, I was like, I couldn't see where the pack was. I looked at my watch and it didn't look like I was running too fast. So for a good, like at least 4 to maybe 5 miles, I felt like I was not running with people at all and kind of falling into my old bad habit of like just constantly running away from people. As soon as like I got to a group, I would catch up to some people and then I'd say like, all right, well, maybe I'll just run with these guys. And then it felt too slow. So I'd go around, and I just feel like I always do that. And it's hard to sometimes remember things that don't come naturally to you when you're at like mile 17 and you're feeling good. But it's definitely something that I did. So I think that one mile surge at like mile 16, I don't want to say ruined it, because I think it was like basically like the topper of the cake from miles 1 through 16. But like that's when like after that, like I just started feeling like, ooh, that was a mistake, and I think I need to kind of like start, maybe let's run a little bit slower, maybe run some 7:30s, see where that 3:10 pace group is. And it took them like 5 or 6 miles to catch up to me before I kind of had any idea of where they were. Maybe even a little bit longer than that, because I really don't think that I saw them until we had already gone further past Chinatown, past Pilsen, past Sox Stadium, and already started making the way back up. And so like I don't really think I saw them again until like mile 24. And when we were, I think at that point, I remember them yelling out 12 minutes to the finish. And I was like, oh, I'm not gonna make it to the finish in 12 minutes because I was like, we're at like mile 24. So like, yeah, that's about when I saw them again. So like, I'm not sure how I got that far ahead of them. The times don't really show. Like, I'm trying to look at my splits and figure out from the 5K splits that I'm getting from the course, from my chip time, or from my splits as well, like how like such a gap opened up. I don't really know because I couldn't see like where they were or what happened, but like I lost them at some point, and I feel like at that point like all my discipline was just gone, and I was like, oh, I'm running by feel. Oh, there's people I know. Oh, there's more people I know. And then I just was like, I think I just, every time I see people I know, I think I inadvertently run a little bit faster. Just because I get so excited. I'm like just like a little kid or like a puppy dog that gets excited to see someone it knows. So that's just what I think a lot of what happened to me out there. Then it really started to hurt, like right around after Chinatown and getting up to Sox Stadium. That's when the sun really started coming out, and I'm like, just it feels like you're running on the highway. You're basically on like a frontage road. It gets a little bit quiet out there, and that's when I really started to struggle. Normally when I overdo it in a race, I really feel it at like my quads, like right above the kneecaps. It's where it feels kind of like, it's almost as if there's like little glass crystals in there, and like moving too much just feels like lots of little tiny cuts. It just really like sharp pains. I didn't get that in the quads today. Instead, on that day, I got it for this, like a similar feeling, but further up, like almost like kind of like in my hip or like in my groin kind of area, but on the front, still kind of like at the tops of the quads. And so what that ended up happening was, like normally when I get deeper into a race, I think, all right, think about form, think about being efficient, run pretty, run tall. As soon as I tried to like pick up my knees, my legs were like, nope. We're not doing that. As soon as I try to kind of like pick up my feet on the foot strike to kind of kick my own butt a little bit, my legs were like, nope, you're not going to do that either. So I was like kind of like shuffling feet a little bit. It's kind of like that was the only thing that worked. And I was like, all right, I'm either going to shuffle my feet the rest of the race, and that's all I got, or I'll shuffle my feet for a little bit, and then maybe that'll be enough to get my legs moving a little bit again. And that did work a little bit. Not enough to be able to keep up with the 3:10 pace group, but enough to like get in a nice push going up that last hill up Roosevelt and then coming down the home stretch. So I feel like I had a pretty good like last 800 meters of the race. My last mile, according to Stride, came in at 7:11. So feeling pretty good about that. I don't really think I had a lot more to give than that. It's not like I think like, well, if I just willed my way through it, maybe the last 24 to 26 with that 3:10 group, maybe I could have kept up with them. I don't really think so. I think had I tried, the wheels really would have fallen off way before I got to the finish line. So, I think with the way I ran it, the first 16 miles, I finished it the best I could. I gave it, I think I gave it a lot. I gave it everything I had on the day. I was struggling at the end, but I was just like, you know what? I've been telling you guys, I've been telling myself that this day is not going to be a day about time. And so like, I looked up as I was kind of reminding myself that, and I saw like the street lined, like just all the way down as far as my eyes could see. This is just absolutely amazing. Because I had spent so much time running away from people, I felt like I was by myself. So I felt like I was the only person running down the street at the time when I was running down the street. And so I just felt like 2 full city blocks of people were just cheering for me. So it was just absolutely amazing feeling. And it gave me what I needed to charge up the hill. I don't know how fast I charged up the hill, but I felt like I charged up the hill and then rounded that corner to make it down to the finish. And I just had a really great time finishing this race. Weirdly, looking back at it, like a couple years ago or even last year, finishing at 3:14:44, I wouldn't have envisioned that I could be as happy with that finish as I am. But, maybe it's because I'm getting older. Maybe it's because of what it took, to get to this start and finish line this year. That number really doesn't matter that much to me at all. I was just happy to be out there, share miles with some people, see people that I knew, make new friends, and just really enjoy the race. So the time is what it is, or it was what it was, and I've got some lessons learned for next time, which is going to be, I think, in about 8 weeks from now. Before we talk about, kind of lessons learned and what I'm going to do for next time, let's talk about nutrition, because I don't think we've talked about that yet. So the plan going in was 6 gels, 2 Martin 100s, 2 Martin calves, and 2 Huma Chia Pluses, because they have a little bit of caffeine and a lot of salt, 245 milligrams each. And I feel like that was the right number for me. I felt like I was pretty well fueled. I took a gel every 4 miles pretty consistently. And I feel like that really worked. There were some points later in the race where I just didn't feel like eating anymore. Like the gel at mile 16, I didn't really feel like taking it. Cause it was, I think at that point I had a Huma on deck and I was like, I don't really want that. And I think that, I don't know, for my next race or for a race that's not going to be as hot where I'm not going to be sweating as profusely, I think maybe instead of a second Huma, I might bring in another Martin calf, because those are just fun to eat. I enjoy the caffeine. It just hits you real hard. And it's exciting. So I like those. So maybe I might change it up a little bit depending on what the weather is going to be for my next marathon. But I think the 6 gels was a good number. I think I took Gatorade at almost every aid station that I saw. And I took water to dump on myself pretty much every aid station as well. I did drink water sometimes, but not a ton. Mostly it was the Gatorade in terms of what I drank. So I feel like over the course of the race, I was getting plenty of salt. So I do think since I was getting it from the Gatorade Endurance, maybe I didn't need that second Huma Chia. So, but I don't think that substantially changed kind of how things went on the day. Overall, I was pretty happy with the nutrition plan, and I do think that 6 is the right number for me. The one thing that I also might change for another race is if, it's a day where I feel like I'm working a little bit harder than I should be, whether it's because the pace group is going faster than I think it should be, or if it's because whatever the conditions are make me feel like this is just a harder day. I do think that I'm going to be a little bit more willing to kind of shift the gels around. So maybe I take that first gel at mile 3 rather than mile 4, or just move it around that way, just so that way, if I'm working hard, then fuel a little bit earlier. If I'm cruising along at the intended level of effort, then, take things as planned. And I think I need to be able to adjust that a little bit more accordingly. So that'd be really the only other thing I'd change. So I think for CIM, I think I have 8 weeks. I'll have to take a look at the calendar and I'll make a more detailed kind of training plan in terms of what I'm going to do for yet another unusual build-up for a marathon. I mean, that's kind of the theme for this year is every race that I'm preparing for has kind of a strange build-up. But I've got 8 weeks. I'm already at marathon fitness in terms of being able to hit the distance, but I want to be able to bring that pace down by quite a bit. And so that's going to be a big ask. And, I don't think that the time I have is indicative of my current level of fitness. That might be just one of those, runner's lies that we tell ourselves when we have a bad day out there on the course. But I do think that my fitness is a little bit better than a 3:14. But it's certainly not at 3-hour shape right now. So I'm thinking that, what I'd like to do going forward is, all this year I've been doing a lot of shorter stuff, not a lot, but more VO2 max work than I tend to do. And threshold work, but, following more of the Jack Daniels plan of threshold work. And I still like those, those mile repeats or the 6x6 minutes that I like to do, that I would like to think have made me a powerful runner, or a more powerful runner than I normally am. And so really what I want to be able to focus on is getting a lot more long runs in. I only had one 20-mile run in the build up to Chicago, and so I'm going to kind of count that and the marathon this last weekend as part of the build-up really for CIM. And so that's already 2 very long runs, and I'd like to get in 1 to 2 more of those at that kind of length. But also I want to be spending a lot more time at marathon pace and a lot more time focusing on some maybe longer than 6-minute intervals of threshold pace as well. So that's something else that I think that I'll be slightly tweaking as we go forward once I can recover from Chicago. And then start getting ready to do some more workouts again. But I'll have to kind of think about what I'm going to do a little bit, revisit some of the books that I like to look at, as I get ready to kind of write up whatever I'm going to cobble together for CIM. So overall, I think that this weekend was just absolutely fantastic. I had just so much fun. This weekend was like a homecoming and like a housewarming, all put together in just the absolute best way. Putting together the Kofuzi Run Club and having so many of you guys come out, which still just like, I don't really kind of like understand it yet, how so many people came to support and just join together and share a run. I thought that was absolutely amazing. And then getting the opportunity to sit down and do some interviews with people that I've been following and interacting with on the internet, on YouTube for so long, and finally getting able to sit down and talk to them in person and then spend some time with them and with cameras off as well, was just absolutely amazing. This year, I really wanted those events to be in-person events to share with you guys, but with everything, I didn't really want to gather everyone in kind of like an indoor area. But hopefully, as we go forward, this weekend will become even bigger. I'm not sure exactly how it'll become bigger, but I want to have more events like this and really turn it into a Chicago Marathon weekend rather than a day where you just kind of fly in, get the bib, race, and fly out. I really want to make it kind of like, worth people. Some people travel from really far away, and I kind of want to make it more worth their trip, but also because it's a rare thing for people to come into Chicago, I really want to make it kind of like become this big thing that I can help host in terms of like having you guys come in and spend time with me so that I can meet you guys, and then so that way you guys can meet each other as well. So that's something that I would like to see continue to happen and to continue to grow. I really feel like I've turned the corner a lot in YouTubing, in running, in marathoning, and I just learned a lot and was just I just felt so fulfilled throughout the entire weekend, as busy and hectic and crazy as it was. Like, it was just a fantastic weekend, and I have no one but you guys to thank, and of course everyone that puts on this race as well to thank for putting together such a fantastically run event. It was a fantastic time. For all of you who are here to share it with me, thank you so much for doing that. For all of you who are thinking about it, I highly recommend it. It is a lot of fun. I wouldn't really trade it for any other race in the world. So those are my thoughts on the Chicago Marathon 2021. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below, or better yet, please feel free to stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this very long video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there and recovering well from your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?